Howdy, folks! Happy Monday. I've seen a extended forecast for the month of August in Buffalo, and no, it doesn't show much rain, which I'll believe it when I see it. But because it's like I'm living in Seattle, and this morning I woke up, Russ. It's August the 2nd. It was 57 degrees.
Yeah, but it was a nice change. It was about 70 here. I liked it.
I like that for October, not for August.
I want to see like an alternate reality, a Mike in Miami instead of Mike in Buffalo.
Oh no.
I want to see is he in pastel? Does he wear pastels instead of gray all the time? That's what I want to see.
You're never going to see that.
Well, this is blue. This isn't gray.
It doesn't. Yeah, see right there, that guy can't be in denial like this guy. But all right, let's talk about. If you ever wondered why Mike Scioscia is not managing in baseball, I'm going to tell you why. Because if you watch the Olympic baseball game today against Japan, you'll know why. So, a couple things. First one is in international play, when you are up in the 10th inning, you get runners at first and second. So, with first and second and no out, Todd Frazier's up, and he had one hit in the game, but it's not like this is the Todd Frazier of 10 years ago where he's going to hit it out of the park a good amount of times. You were supposed to bunt. And if you bunt and you get the runners to second and third, Kev, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm going to say it's probably over 50% that I'm going to get that run in. They don't do it. He strikes out. They make two more outs, the out of the inning. Japanese team gets up. What do? They bunt. Second and third. Next guy hits a fly ball. The outfielder doesn't even run for it. The game's over. It was just so simple. And to look at that, and the other mistake that they made was they have David Robertson on staff. They put him in the 8th inning. He comes in a jam with two guys on, gets out of the jam, and then they put this guy in, McGuff, who has never made it in the majors. He's a closer in Japan, and you can't find blown saves in Japan. So I have no way of knowing of the 16 saves how many are blown. But the fact is they brought this guy in, and he gives up the lead. And I'm thinking, you have David Robertson there. They don't know David Robertson. They know this guy. This guy picked, because basically the Japanese team is an all-star team from all the Japanese baseball teams. So it's just, to me, it's inexplicable. They still have a chance to win gold, but like Scioscia handed it to him.
See, Anthony knows David Robertson, and he knows him for blowing.
Not really well enough. Not well enough.
Well enough.
He was very in his tenure here.
Oh, my arm hurts.
Yeah, I watched that too, Russ, and I was flabbergasted by that. I still believe in bunting in that situation, and because then there's so many different ways he can get home. With a pass ball, a wild pitch, sometimes a ground out, just
anything,
a low roller. Yeah. So I thought it was an error right from the beginning. Plus, it puts pressure on the on the home team. So I didn't get it either, and it didn't make any sense to me. The only thing I thought of is Frazier. Had he not bunted before? Did he have no history in bunting?
This guy's been a major leaguer
for
15 years. I
know. This year we've all seen stories about how one of the reasons why managers is percentages why they don't like to bunt, but some of it is the guy.
Then you pinch it for him for a guy that knows how to bunt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good point. I want to talk about the Olympics too. There's a lot of crossover between hockey and soccer. There are a lot of hockey fans who are also soccer fans, and there was a big game this morning. It's 4:00 in the morning. I wouldn't have got up, but my wife decided she was going to get up. She's a former high school soccer coach, so I said, "All right, I'll get up and watch too." And soccer in America, women's soccer, has been a very big deal for a long time. Like, we were at the forefront when this really got started and got on a roll. America was the team that everybody looked up to. They were intimidating. Not anymore. In this tournament, and not a lot has been made about this, but they only scored a goal in regulation in only one of the games they played. Now, they're going to end up in the bronze medal game. But they beat New Zealand. They tied Australia 0-0. They won their quarterfinal game on penalties. They didn't score during regulation. The only team that they got a goal against was New Zealand. and they
They
got
got old, Kev. That's the only thing I could take out of it. When I saw, and I don't know a lot, maybe Anthony knows more because he follows men's soccer. When I saw that Alex Morgan was on the bench 2 games ago, I'm like, okay, clearly this team is getting old, and this is their last gasp.
Well, I mean, they do have some older players on it, but he didn't use those older players like he has in the past. I mean, it's a different coach, but coaches in the past have played them obviously a lot. And Rapinoe was a sub today, for example.
Yeah.
She was too busy. She was too busy doing a Subway commercial.
Okay, but you know what? Hold on.
What do you got against her doing a Subway?
No, there's stuff in the chat room about this too. No. I'm going to attack this.
Because Mike's a Messerab, that's why.
No,
you're not allowed to make money, or
right. No. For years, these women were not making anything. Now they're actually getting endorsements, and there are guys bitching at it. I'm not going to pick on Mike, but I see it in the chat room too. They have this dislike because they see them in sponsorship ads, and it's like, stop. Just stop.
Yeah, I mean, like, why can't they make money?
I have nothing against them making money, but their fame is based on playing a particular sport, and they seem like, especially Rapinoe. I'm probably butchering her.
Megan Rapinoe.
Right.
Megan
Rapinoe.
Okay.
Rapinoe, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've heard Rapinoe. I don't know.
You say Rapinoe, I say Rapinoe, and let's call the whole thing. No, but I think she opens herself up to criticism because believe me, during the Stanley Cup playoffs, all I did was see her and Tony Hawk on these stupid Subway commercials. They made me ill, and of course, when it's in heavy rotation, I get annoyed at them.
You get annoyed at everything, Mike.
Yeah,
everything annoys you. I swear.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
It annoys you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, my only point of all that, although it is irritating that Mike can't allow people to make a living when they're a professional athlete, but my only point of all that is, we've reached the point where the U.S. it has to be considered they're not a dominant power anymore in women's soccer until they come back.
And I'll say this, Mike. Basketball has also seen that as well. I think the rest because again, the fact that the U.S. team was as dominant as they were, other countries ramped up their development, maybe ramped up their efforts in this case in competing. Again, this is based off of not a lot of research, but things just sometimes pattern wise, invariably we go back to we revert a little bit to the mean on occasion, and we see the tide begin to rise in other places. So
yeah, no, that's a good point, Anthony. I mean, part of the reason that they've declined is all the other countries have gotten improved.
Yeah.
Sweden is much better in women's soccer, to be sure. They hadn't beaten Canada in last 20 years, and that's who beat them in this semifinal as well. So obviously Canada has improved, and Brazil has gotten better through the years as well. So
now
that contributed. Yeah,
I mean the U.S. women have dominated soccer for years, ever since Brandy Chastain and whipping off the shirt with the sports bra. I mean that whole thing. But they dominate me from Mia Hamm on forward. The thing is, I'm sort of a casual soccer fan. I would love to see the United States dominate in soccer, but pretty much in the men, they're a joke. They didn't make the World Cup the last time, and they've been great in women's soccer. But as you're saying, the rest of the world are catching up to them. And I'm sure if you want to translate that to hockey, Canada and the U.S. are way ahead of everybody in women's hockey. But how many years is it going to be before Sweden, Finland, and Russia catch up to them? It's going to be probably the same thing, Kev.
Yeah, no, that's a good comparison. It does take a long time, maybe longer in hockey because of the cost of the game and, the need for arenas. It's a little bit easier to put up a soccer pitch than it is an ice arena as well. But I think that is a good comparison. But it was interesting to see that, and to me the irony is that it comes at a time when there's a lot of people know a lot about women's soccer. We've reached a point in America where because the athletes have higher visibility now, we kind of know about it. And now that everybody knows about who the athletes are, now it's the time when they, it's no guarantee that they'll win the bronze medal. I mean, they played Australia 0-0. And
are you waking up early for the bronze medal, Kev? I wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I bet my wife is, though. So she's really into it. Actually, my daughter, who lives in South Carolina, once she heard my wife was getting up, she got up and they texted throughout the game. So
and we'll start after this. The last time I ever got up early for a soccer game was when the World Cup was in South Korea, and I think the U.S. made the Elite Eight, for lack of a better term. And then they lost in that game, and obviously going back to Nagano in '98 when Canada played the Czech Republic, that game I think was at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the downside to the Olympics being halfway across the world. If you want to watch these games live in the world of social media, where you're going to find out the score, even if you don't want to find out the score, you're going to have to get up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning to watch it live.
Well, I got to tell you, the people covering them over there to cover it for over here, they're only sleeping like 5 hours a night at best.
Well, yeah, because
traveling to get to the events, and they're there all day, and then they're on at weird times. They are sleep deprived.
Yeah, no, that is true. Having had to do that, but to me, one of the romances of the Olympics is that kind of situation. Like, it doesn't happen all that often. So, like, I don't mind it. If it's a big event, getting up early or staying up late or setting an alarm or, I mean, that's you remember that years later. Yeah, I remember getting up in the middle of the night to watch, this game.
That's
so,
no, that's true.
And it's a special event,
Yeah.
So
I'm sure many Canadians remember fondly when Dominic Hasek stoned them in the shootout. Go ahead.
I have to tell the chat room, just because Eck wanted us to do it and will continue to have us to do it, those picks we made the other day, those aren't the picks we're rolling into the season with. Those are our ridiculously early picks.
Yes, and those picks,
hence the adjectives.
Yes, and the Atlantic picks have changed with Krejci retiring and teams making additions. So that's why they're called ridiculously early picks.
Yeah, the way to view them is they're kind of like power rankings. So basically, after the free agent period, we all. And that's how I viewed it. Like, who's the team that excited me after that? Well, those are the teams I went with.
It's a snapshot, is all it is.
Here's a quick question. I know we're about to get started, but we all saw Derek Stepan signed with Carolina for 1 year at $1.3 million. What was the time frame of that versus Krejci's retirement versus Krejci leaving? Because I think Boston could have probably used.
That's a good point.
They could have used him as a replacement, and that would have been very budget. That would have been a pretty, a budget signing for them, but it would have worked. I think.
From what I understand, the Bruins knew Krejci was going to retire before July 28th. That's why they went out and signed Haula, signed Foligno. Okay. So, I mean, I would think that since they didn't sign Stepan, they didn't think he was a fit for them. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, August 2nd, 2021.
I'm Anthony Mingioni.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. So anybody who watched or listened to Off the Post this weekend, we started talking about Evander Kane. And the story has been furthered because Evander Kane yesterday put out a statement. I'll just read it. It's very short here. Kane categorically denying the allegations made by his apparently soon-to-be ex-wife. Kane says via social media, I have never gambled, bet on hockey, never gambled, bet on a Sharks game, never gambled, bet on any of my games, and never thrown a hockey game. The facts are I personally had my best season of my career last year and was the most consistent I have been throughout any season. I'm proud of that. I love the game of hockey and would never do anything of what was alleged. I look forward to cooperating fully with the league's investigation, having my name cleared, and looking forward to the upcoming season. And then his wife posted apparently a bunch of mailers that they had received at their home from gambling, from casinos and things of that nature. And knowing people in my family who have frequented casinos, that only happens when you go to casinos. Kevin, I mean, this is a story that's going to be investigated. We don't know, where it's going to go. I know that former teammates of Kane, like Robin Leonard, who was his teammate in Buffalo, came out and said, it's funny how everything has become guilty until proven innocent. And he basically supported Kane in the sense that, if he says he didn't do it, he didn't do it. But this is the league is going to have to investigate this. And I made the point to Russ, shoeless Joe Jackson hit 375 in the World Series. Just because you had overall had a good season doesn't mean that there was something untoward going on. So this has to be investigated.
Yeah, for sure. Although some people think shoeless Joe Jackson was innocent.
Right.
But I mean, I don't have any idea, what went on with his gambling habits, but the league will investigate all this. My only issue, even if it turns out he's completely innocent of this, if you're going to be involved in gambling, you set yourself up for this. I've always there's two things that I think athletes should really be careful about, and I know a lot of them aren't in this regard. Number one, I don't know why anybody would engage in social media if you're an athlete and other, except to promote your brand, or if you're doing some influencing or that regard. But I wouldn't get involved in that, and I wouldn't get involved in public gambling, which Evander Kane has. He has had things on social media about that. So if nothing else, Evander Kane someone should talk to him about, if you're going to gamble, do it private. I am absolutely confident that there are plenty of players who gamble who don't end up in the public eye the way Evander Kane has.
I'm sure they've called up a relative, a friend, or whatever, and there's nothing you can do about that if they place the money for you. But what Kevin's saying is the tale as old as time as far as sports goes. And to further it, if a guy is low on money, or you hear about bankruptcies, or you hear about foreclosures, and then you hear about gambling, that is the next thing that you're susceptible to as an athlete. And that's what the league is trying to stay away from. So I don't blame him at all.
Anthony?
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, again, the key thing is going to be, the mailers certainly are a concern there again, but I think also that the league is going to need to see direct corroboration here.
Yeah, it's circumstantial evidence. That's
I've got a card for the couple of times I've been to Atlantic City. Yeah. They could go and talk to that company and say, hey, I know you can't give me the information on the card, but is he a frequent customer here? And they'll say yes or no. They'll tell them.
Basically, in this case, again, as Kevin just stated, you really put yourself at risk. And I know we've seen this also. We know about, enough talk about Michael Jordan and other athletes, Charles Barkley, and gambling during their careers as well, which kind of put them, these are things that have been discussed before. But in terms of, again, we know the line is gambling on your own games here. And that's the big thing that we're really looking at here. And what you do with your money, again, is your business. But again, you are putting yourself at risk here to really, cause yourself some trouble.
All right, let's move off of that story, and I'm sure it'll unfold as the days and the weeks go by. But let's start with some stuff that's going to be on the ice. And the news came forward yesterday that Marc-Andre Fleury, after being traded to the Chicago Blackhawks by the Vegas Golden Knights, has agreed to report, and he's not retiring. And he went on social media with a video saying, "I'm in." So he has a final year of his contract, making $7 million, and after that he's an unrestricted free agent. But he's going to get an opportunity here, Kev, with the goaltending situation in Chicago fairly wide open. I mean, Lankinen had a good year last year, but now Lankinen, instead of being an average number one, is a really good number two. And if Fleury is anywhere close to the way he played in Vegas, that puts Chicago in position to potentially make the playoffs.
Well, for sure. I loved how Fleury handled this. I think he was really sincere when he said, I just want to go and talk about it with my family. He's an older player. I'm sure his kids are a little bit older. I don't know how old they are, but I think he wanted to discuss it with his wife. Obviously, this is a change in lifestyle for him, but he's going to another great city. And then, he had some fun with it. He put out a video. He didn't say anything disparaging about his Vegas Golden Knight experience. He just says, look, I'm going to show up. I'm going to play hockey. And this is such a big boost for Chicago. I wanted to make sure I was right on this. But, the average save percentage of the Blackhawks last year was .906, better actually than I thought it was. They ranked 20th in the NHL, so they were in the bottom third. And obviously Fleury won the Vezina Trophy, was at .928. So he will give this team a boost, in addition to obviously Taves coming back and the addition of Seth Jones and the addition of Tyler Johnson. And I think Mike's right on. I think, I don't think they're guaranteed to make the playoffs because this division is pretty tight. But they're, probably with 4 teams that have a chance to win the final 2 playoff spots. And, if you look at how hard they played last season, I think you can convince yourself they're going to make a good run at it.
Russ, I still think they're a little weak on the blue line, even with the addition of the Jones brothers and Jake McCabe, who, if he comes back from the ACL injury, I thought he was a pretty good defenseman in Buffalo. But I still think there's a little weakness there. They're going to need some breaks, like whether Ian Mitchell steps up or Calvin DeHaan stays healthy. But that's if they get good play out of their blue line as it's currently constituted, I think they could make the playoffs.
They have a chance. They're a little too married for Connor Murphy for my taste. I don't know what they see in him. He's had some really rough seasons, but Ian Mitchell can certainly find a role. Look, Cleve Jones is okay. He's an average NHL defenseman. Their defense is now middle of the league where it was bottom of the league. So if their goaltending is better than what it was, that's what will make it competitive. If Fleury's a little bit off, they're only going to be slight.
Especially he was used to having a pretty solid defense in front of him in Vegas, pretty stout defense. Whether or not Seth Jones, can do a pretty good Alex Pietrangelo impersonation on that blue line. That's something that we're going to need to see going forward. I like the moves that Chicago has made. I think Fleury can, and Fleury, I think if he's on, that becomes, as we all talk about, that symbiotic relationship between the defense and the goaltending. If you're getting good goaltending, that sometimes can help lift the defense and vice versa. So combining all that together, I'm glad to see that Fleury is going to continue his career at least for another season in Chicago. It'll be fun to watch him in another spot, and obviously the plot line of him when he goes up against Vegas is going to be something that we're all going to watch. So I'm glad to see that he's going to continue playing. That's for sure.
And
the funniest thing I saw about that, somebody tweeted, and I don't remember who it was, tweeted that it's time for Penguins fans to admit that it's over with Marc-Andre Fleury. And I thought that was pretty funny because, when all this was going on, we all heard, obviously, maybe they can just flip him to Pittsburgh and so forth. Yeah, he's not going back to Pittsburgh. So at least I don't think he is. But who knows? We'll see.
Or if he retires and signs a one-day says, I'll do a one-day contract. To retire a Penguin. That's going to be about the extent of it. I agree, Kevin.
Yeah, and the biggest thing in terms of a return or an upgrade with the Blackhawks is if Jonathan Taves is 100% healthy and you add him at the top at number 1 center to go along with Dotch and Johnson up the middle. Now all of a sudden something that was marginal weakness is now a strength. So there'll be an interesting story to follow. Now, one thing off the ice with the Blackhawks, and I think this was a smart PR move. Danny Wirtz, the CEO of the Blackhawks, indicated that the Hawks will share the results of the internal investigation into the whole
Aldrich situation. Yeah.
Aldrich situation. Which I honestly, Kev, if they had kept this private, and some people were saying it would be better to keep it private because you'd get more witnesses forthcoming if they knew that the report would not get out. I think everybody would be screaming cover up if they didn't release the report.
Yeah, I mean, transparency in these types of situations is always preferred, it's really an odd situation where you have people with great reputation saying they didn't know anything about it, and then you have other players saying, yeah, but everybody knew about it. So, given the contrast between those two reports, I think it's important and almost imperative that you release the report about who knew what when.
Mm-hmm.
I would say this: it's nice to say there'll be transparency. Will that transparency go back to the point where there's other people who are in position in the Blackhawks that are in other organizations now? Is it going to reach that far, and we're going to find out what their involvement was or wasn't? Is it going to be that kind of transparency?
Mark Bergevin came out and said it because I think it was him that said because the situation is under adjudication and there's an investigation, he wasn't going to say anything publicly about it, and that's it. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or if that's a cop out, because really, I mean, people.
That's the whole point.
It's the legally expedient thing to do, and whether we like it or not, that is probably, till the investigation concludes, is the correct legal path.
That is the correct legal path, and that's why I just say, after it all, with the transparency, are we going to see all of that, or are we just going to see how they're handling it now?
Yeah,
that's the.
I guess it would very much depend on. I guess there are, with each individual person, that is there a certain, or they're willing to speak a bit more if certain things aren't necessarily, like it's a certain level of anonymity with regards to it. I don't know if you can, because again, the minute you go to anonymity, you're losing the transparency almost immediately.
Right.
Maybe.
Now, one of the bigger surprises of free agent day was the Philip Grubauer signing with Seattle, a 6-year deal at just under $6 million per. And it was reported over the weekend that the initial contract was rejected by the NHL, and the reason it was rejected was because of the limitation of front loading being 25% more in year one than year two. They were off by, I think, $150,000. So all they did was
those were on $250, and they had to shift. Yeah. According to Jeff Baker from Seattle Times,
they shifted it from year 3 to year 2, so it got underneath the 25% threshold. So now the deal is, and I'm not going to rake them over the coals for that.
Well, hold on, but there is an issue here. The issue going forward is: were they trying to get away with something, or do they not have the greatest cap guy in camp? That's something where. If you don't have the right cap guy these days, you are going to sign some bad deals down the road. That is the issue here.
I'm not going to rake them over the coals, but Russ Cohen will.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a minute thing that it sure seems like a mistake to me.
I would give him a. I would give him a mulligan.
They get a mulligan for this one. We'll see.
Somebody just didn't have the right decimal in the right spot, or because it was so easily correctable. Although. What is worth talking about is, that was a miscalculation, I think, on the Avalanche part for thinking they were going to be able to re-sign him, and they didn't. And, as it turned out, they recovered nicely, because I think actually Kemper, in my opinion, is an improvement. Well, I love Kemper. So
yeah, I think it's an upgrade, because I think he's now the question with Kemper has always been durability, because he seems to get hurt every year. But here's the thing, and Elliot Friedman talked about this on his 31 Thoughts podcast. That trade, and it turned out to be Connor Timmins and a number 1 for Kemper. Mm-hmm. Edmonton was in on Kemper. They apparently had talked to Buffalo, as we talked about on the Buzzcast, about sending Koskinen to Buffalo because Buffalo had the cap space and they needed goaltending if they got in on the Kemper deal. And purely it was that Arizona liked Connor Timmins better than the prospect that Edmonton offered in the deal for Kemper. We don't know who that is. It could be Broberg. It could be – we don't know. But they liked Timmins better, Russ. And Timmins is an NHL defenseman. So
he is. He's a guy you can put in the NHL, and I would like Timmins better too. He has an offensive side. He's a good skater. He's got size to him. He's like 6'1", I think. So yeah,
how can we say that we like Timmins better when we don't even know who the other
guy is?
Right.
Well, that's the thing. We don't know who that.
I like the fact that there's a certainty with Timmins. That's all I mean.
And considering the fact again that the miscalculation does technically cause the Avalanche to have to use an asset that they might potentially use elsewhere. First round pick. Although they're calculating on the fact that they're going to be close to winning the cup, and then it's close. Right. It'll be feeling more like a second round pick. Now, go, Mike, you first. I'm sorry.
No, but this is the second off season in a row. They fell short on Markstrom, and it was money instead of a prospect. And now they've fallen short on Kemper. And as of right now, your goaltending is still Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith. So for all the improvements and the additions that Edmonton has made, I think it's undercut if that's the goaltending that they go into the season.
Well, but hold
on. Curtis McElhinney. They
still have Alex Stalock, and if Alex Stalock is healthy,
come on.
What do you mean? Oh, come on. He's better than Mikko Koskinen. He is, and there's no question he can.
I'm better than Mikko Koskinen.
But you're acting like there's nobody else. Alex Stalock is there. Last year was compromised because of COVID. How did he do the year before? He was really good.
He was really good years ago. Yeah, but I still think they need a goalie. So
yeah.
Now, this is the thing. One other thing with Seattle that I want to kind of bring up with Grubauer signing. I'm wondering how Chris Dridger is feeling right now. Because Dridger was kind of brought in. A lot of it was all kind of geared towards him a little bit here, and I know he was on a contract that's hot, like above high, almost just under like we were calling NHL starter salary, and now you're getting Grubauer. It's established. He's now the backup. And he might have had starter opportunities elsewhere.
Well, certainly
I don't
in
know
Buffalo.
How many, though?
Certainly in Buffalo.
Yeah, in Buffalo.
Maybe in Edmonton.
Maybe.
I mean, would Dridger versus Koskinen?
Yeah, I mean, how about Dridger versus Smith? They would probably fight that one out.
How about San Jose, where it's Aiden Hill and James Reimer?
Yeah, but they wouldn't spend the kind of money it would take to get Dridger in San Jose because they know they're not competitive.
Right. Okay. I mean, I
want to mention one thing too, Mike. Spit and Chicklets online. They are really just trying to cause trouble for Kirill Kaprizov. They've got a picture of him because he's water skiing. Hey, water skiing is not that dangerous. I've done it. My dad used to do it his whole life and never, ever, ever got hurt. But actually, he's not under contract. So it doesn't matter.
Your father or?
No, Kirill Kaprizov is not currently under contract. So you know what? He can do whatever the hell he wants.
Why are we saying he's getting himself in trouble?
Because potential injury.
Because of injury, they're like, how's the negotiations going? And they're showing him water skiing, and you know what they're implying. That's why.
That's because they're trolls, Russ.
Yeah.
That's because that's.
But again, let the guy water ski. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not that dangerous.
And let your dad water ski if he wants to.
He can't anymore. He's like in his late 80s. But he went until, I think he water skied through his 60s. So, you know.
Well, I hope he gets a contract too.
Thanks, Kev. I'll tell him that.
Yeah.
Okay, some news and notes. We mentioned the Islanders last week about how it's sort of like Operation Shutdown when it comes to news coming out of
Omerta. I keep telling you that, Michael.
And again, Elliot Friedman on 31 Thoughts essentially said, right now, no news on Cizikas, no news on Parise, no news on Palmieri, but he believes that all three of them or two of three of them are signed. And the reason that the news is not out is because Lou does not want other teams to know how much cap space he has to work with in terms of potential trade or in terms of two free agents, both RFAs, I think Pellich just got a year left, but he's eligible to sign the extension, and Beauvillier is an RFA. So, it's sort of like a shell game in a way. And I get it. It's like that's smart management.
But Pellich, when he filed for arbitration, he now made it harder on Lou, because now that's his way of saying, hey, if you want to let it go to arbitration, I know I had a great year. I still want to get paid what I'm worth. And so Lou is now going to play a trickier game now with all of this Jenga with all the other players' contracts.
Yeah, I mean, he can agree to a 1-year deal coming out of arbitration. We know, and that's the thing. 17 players filed for salary arbitration. I'll just mention that number because we know 16 of them will settle before it gets to the, But
arbitration, works exactly how it was intended to work.
Right.
Yeah.
It forces the two sides to get together, and it was never intended to actually determine contracts. It was to force you to get it together, and it usually works.
But what that potential trade is with the Islanders or potential signing, we don't know. But Russ, this involves the Rangers as well, because I saw a report that's saying the Devils, Rangers, and Islanders are battling over Vladimir Tarasenko. I sincerely doubt that they're battling over a guy. I mean,
Don't doubt it, Mike. Glenn Sader has always wanted Vladimir Tarasenko, so don't doubt it. And just because he's not the GM, he's always wanted Ryan Reeves too, and magically Ryan Reeves is a Ranger. Don't doubt it. That's all I could say.
Well, I doubt it because, Vladimir Tarasenko, as good as he could be, if healthy, the question marks about and we'll talk about Jack Eichel in a minute, but if there are question marks about Jack Eichel and there are different injuries, but with Tarasenko.
Pavel Bure after 7 knee surgeries, Mike.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in today's medical world where,
yes,
I think you're more concerned about it than they will be, because I think they'll have a lot more information. Now, Jack Eichel's situation is a little bit different because, this is a new form of surgery, and it's a little more complicated, and in terms of for other doctors to review, and not everybody's on board yet.
Yeah.
So that's a different situation. But Tarasenko's shoulder surgery, I'm sure they'll be able to look at the medical records and have a pretty good handle on it.
And anybody, again, I keep referring to this podcast because it's excellent. Anybody who listens to 31 Thoughts regularly, they had a neurosurgeon who is part of the Eichel medical team. He was somebody who they got a second opinion on, and he explained the difference between the disc replacement and the fusion, which is a procedure that apparently the Sabres would not have a problem with because it's been done to hockey players before, whereas the disc replacement has not been performed on an NHL player. It's been performed on players in other sports and players in college hockey or high school hockey. But essentially the whole difference is range of motion and recovery time. With the disc replacement, the range of motion would be the same after surgery as it would be before surgery, whereas the fusion would limit range of motion. And that's something that Eichel's camp is not in favor of, because it could have detrimental effects to his future, the future part of his career. So, I mean, I get that, but apparently, Kevin, the Sabres are just never going to be on board with the disc replacement. And I don't know if it has to do with insurance or what it has to do with, but I think they want the team that is they're going to trade him to make that decision and them not be on the hook for it.
Yeah, and I still, and I've been saying this now since I heard about this, that I still find it totally bizarre that a player doesn't have final say on his own body in terms of how he's being treated medically. I mean, that seems so foreign, that an employer can demand that you do a certain thing with your body. I know it's in the CBA. I know it's been collectively bargained, but when you read it, there's no wiggle room too. It says you're allowed to consult.
There really isn't.
Yeah, it says you're allowed to consult a third party and get their opinion, but it's still up to the team doctor. He takes that advisement in, and then he makes the final decision. I find that just bizarre that Eichel is subjected to that, and I'm surprised it hasn't come out before. Although, in most cases, probably 99%, 99.5% or whatever, everybody's going to agree what the proper course of action is.
I think it's the Jared Cowan one that made them change this in the CBA because of the way that went down, Kev.
Okay.
Because I covered that the Jared Cowan situation was, and Lou Lamoriello was GM of the Leafs at the time. He was part of the Dion Phaneuf deal, which occurred right before the trade deadline. He was reviewed by the Leafs doctors. They gave him a clean bill of health, and then Lou Lamoriello told Cowan, "You're not playing the rest of the year because we want to buy you out." And then he had surgery in the offseason because he had, I think it was a back issue. He had a back issue that he wanted taken care of. He got a second opinion from a doctor. He had surgery without the Leafs say so, and by doing that, since he was still in recovery, they supposedly could not buy him out because he was still recovering. So they went to a mediator, and the mediator said the Leafs were they were within their rights to buy him out because he did that surgery without their say so. So that's the situation here. So Eichel is locked in to what the Sabres want to do. Now, Friedman reported that he spoke to a team that was reportedly interested in Eichel as part of a trade, and that team said that it would be up to him whether he has whatever surgery he has or not. So they just want Eichel, and they'll take him no matter what. So that's that situation. So honestly, Kevin, the thing I look at this situation is ugly. It's gotten uglier in Buffalo. They're at loggerheads. The Sabres are not going to lower their price at this point, and Peter Fish and the representatives for Eichel really don't have much say-so here in terms of unless they're planning on him holding out from training camp, and then the Sabres would hold his salary because he's denied services.
Yeah. So that you almost think that maybe Buffalo wouldn't even mind that.
Right.
Void out if he goes ahead and has surgery.
Yeah, it'll void out his contract.
They could void out his contract, and then they're off the hook for $50 million.
Yeah, but then they don't get anything in return.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Right.
So yeah, it's not quite that simple. But I think that's why they would just suspend him.
Right.
So yeah, it's a bad situation, and the history of the Ryan O'Reilly trade plays into it as well. They feel pressure to get a good deal, and I don't blame them. The fact that the ownership and management group isn't very popular, that plays into it. It's all the above. They haven't been in the playoffs. It's such a complicated mess. And
I'll tell you the uncomplicated part. The Sabres are really hurting themselves because if they are truly going to trade him, the longer this goes means the longer that he's going to miss as part of the season for somebody, which is going to hurt the value of your trade.
Yeah, the recovery time supposedly for the disc replacement would be 6 weeks, according to the doctor. And if it was fusion, it would be up to 3 months. So that's why I think the Sabres want the other team to, the team they eventually trade him to make that decision, and not for them, because if he's out for 3 months, that's basically what Thanksgiving, optimistically, maybe even Christmas.
If they trade him today,
trade him.
And if he goes into surgery, right away. So
yeah, and the Pagulas are doing themselves wonders in terms of their popularity in Western New York, because yesterday it came out that they're asking for $1.5 billion to build a new football stadium, and supposedly as part of the agreement they want hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade KeyBank Center, which is only 20 years old. But I guess wow. Arenas being 20 years old now, Kev, that means they're ancient.
We saw it in Philadelphia. Russ and I both know. They went through a fairly extensive refurb from Wells Fargo Center, and that was built in 96. It was finished and they opened up
World
in
Cup
96.
year, so it was ready for 96. Yeah.
So, we're a little over 20, 25, about 24, 25 years old.
Yeah.
Wells Fargo Center is. So, yeah.
Yeah. And
you know what it is? This is what they fixed in the Wells Fargo, and Anthony's right. Like the hallways were narrow. Those kinds of things. You could add more food. You could add more things. That's what they want. I mean, I get it.
Yeah. Okay, Russ, on the Rangers page, Igor Shesterkin, no, he was not on the list. He didn't file for arbitration. Right, and the speculation is that he is getting close to a deal with the Rangers in the neighborhood of $5.75 to $6 million AAV. Now, the question is, how comfortable would you be in terms of a length on that deal?
Yeah, I would. I mean, right now, if I'm giving him 6, I really only want to give him 3 years. I still need to see a little more body of work. At least the 6, I could say to him, hey, you're amongst the upper echelon goalies as far as what you're getting paid per season, but we need to see a little bit more out of you. And, of course, if it doesn't go that way and they go 6x5 or 6x6, there's some risk in there. And that's what they're going to have to just, decide as a team. I still think a reason they haven't gotten rid of Georgiev is because he does have the potential to be a starter too, if ever given the chance. And so I do think there's, some questions there. I don't think they're big questions, but I think it's just enough that says, do we go all in with this guy yet, or do we wait a little while?
That's why you have bridge deals, just because of this question.
Yeah.
I mean, because it is just a judgment, and Russ could be right, but I'd probably roll the dice. If I'm going to give him that amount of money, I want to get some term out of it.
Right.
So because it's not outrageous. If you could get if you could get any kind of figure that's in a 5, starts with a 5,
right,
I might want to give them 4 or 5 years and just roll the dice on it.
And Anthony, when I brought this up with Russ, I immediately shifted to Carter Hart because he's an RFA. He's coming off a bad year or an okay year, not a great year.
It was, again, compared to his first few seasons, this was definitely we'll call it a down year.
Right, and the question is, I mean, it would be beneficial for the Flyers, like it was for the Avalanche when they signed McKinnon to that really friendly deal off a bad year, and then he had a fantastic year and the years that followed, to maybe get Hart signed on a deal off of this year when his numbers were not as good. I mean, if you get a number with Carter Hart starting with a 4, I would think that would be really great news for the Flyers.
Yeah, I would think so. I think they're going to, and my gut feeling is that's probably where things will go with him, because again, they do have Travis Sanheim to consider as well with that situation. That one likely goes more towards a longer term deal. He'll probably be in the 5 to 6 year range, probably Sanheim. So they have to see things with Hart. But yeah, the timing of Hart having not a great year certainly plays to Philadelphia's advantage here, I think, to try in terms of his contract.
It does, Mike. One more thing.
Yep.
The other thing, like what Kevin said, let's just say they go 6x5 or 6x6 with Shesterkin. That is now bad news for the Islanders, because now Sorokin is going to look at that and say, you've got to give me something comparable.
Well, what that means is they'll have to trade Varlamov, because right now it's Sorokin making $2 million. You can have Varlamov making 5, but you can't have 2 goaltenders making $11 million. You just can't have it. We'll take some questions in the chat here. Anthony asks, do you guys know any teams Kuznetsov could be moved to? What's the holdup? The holdup is 4 years at $7.8 million and the off the ice issues that we've heard about. That's
plus the Capitals have walked that back a little bit.
Yeah.
I've seen the coverage of that and read the coverage, and basically they're saying, look, we never said for sure we were going to move him. Well, he's very difficult to move. That's only slightly less onerous than Duchesne's contract in Nashville from some perspectives. So I don't think they're going to trade him.
But we also know that Kuznetsov has shown when he is engaged, he's one of the most. He could be an absolutely dynamic playmaker.
Yeah,
right.
I think in this circumstance. So I think this was. I do wonder if this is as much a case of they might have been discussing it, but I do think maybe this is a way to kind of shake, rattle the cage a little bit with Kuznetsov to make him think, hey, maybe this is a possibility. They could move on to me, and I need to come back much more engaged into the next season.
It could just as much be that they didn't like what they were being offered in terms of a return.
That too.
I mean, he is the off the ice issues aside, he is a pretty good offensive player. He is a really good number 2 center, or maybe even number 1, with Backstrom being the number 2. And they expect to get something in return for him, even with his issues. But apparently, I don't know what they were offered. There was some.
Yeah, I don't even think I bet they weren't offered anything. It was hard to move players making, his salary.
Almost $8 million for 4 more years.
And coming off a poor season.
Yeah.
He didn't play well last year.
Kevin, I thought it was a miracle that Philadelphia was able to move. It was just a perfect marriage there of being able to move off Jake Voracek's contract.
Yeah, but Voracek is still productive.
Right. Because that's a can be.
He can be, but he wasn't.
Right.
Voracek had numbers last year when you look at him. He had assists. He's an assist guy, he's a playmaker. Where Kuznetsov, it's his number, and it's the fact that last year he didn't play well. He didn't produce. He didn't have numbers.
It's the AAV, it's the term, and exactly what you just said. Funky in the chat. Sorry, go ahead, Russ.
I was going to say there was a question from Bill C. I could answer about.
Well, yeah, I was going to get that one next. I just wanted to ask Kevin this one. Sure. Funky in the chat mentioned Bertuzzi getting the 2-year deal at $4.75 million. As you said earlier, Kev, the Red Wings didn't want to trade him. They got him on a deal. He's 26 years old and he's been productive. With him, I think health has sometimes been the question, but the quality of the player hasn't been.
Yeah. They consider him part of the rebuild, and he adds a layer of tenacity and gumption and grit that they're lacking everywhere else. Really, the only other guy that has a little bit of an edge, but not like Bertuzzi is Ernie. So they really needed to have him back. He also held a little press conference and told us all that. He is expected to be back by training camp. So we're 12 weeks from surgery on his back surgery. He also reported that Dylan Larkin and he work out together. So there was a lot of concern because there had been no news about Larkin.
Right.
And there had been some sightings of him on social media at people's, gatherings and whatever. And, he just looked a little stiff. But Bertuzzi said, no, they're really both at kind of the same level. And they're both skating, and he expected that both of them would be back. And they're coming back to a different team. The addition of Pius Suter now gives them a number 2 center, which they didn't have before, which probably means it's going to be harder for Joe Veleno or Lucas Raymond to make the team.
Maybe Veleno. I don't know if it'll be harder for Raymond. I still think he can make the team.
Well, they're going to have to move someone out if that happens because they're out of roster spots. But, basically what Yzerman has said publicly is, and it was to a question about this very subject about how do you balance out keeping spots open for rookies and then, getting guys that you need. Because Pius Suter is now part of the rebuild. Like, he's at the right age for that. And he said, really, it's a judgment call. Like, nobody's asking whether there's a spot for Mo Seider because, he's already in. They've got 22 players signed, not 23, that kind of thing. But, with everyone else, he said, basically, Veleno will have to earn the spot because he has options left. And the same thing with Lucas Raymond. Now, out of Sweden, we're hearing that the Swedes don't think he's quite ready. But we'll see. When he gets there, if he's dynamic, they could do something. They could waive Franz Nielsen. That's certainly a possibility, and I think they would do that if they had to.
All right, Bill C. In the chat asked about the World Junior Summer Showcase, Russ, and First, let's talk about the player that you wanted to mention, who was picked in the second round by the Islanders, Atu Ratti, who I think he had 6 goals in the tournament.
Yeah. I was gonna say I never put too much stock in how many goals somebody has at the World Junior Summer Showcase. I'll watch a little bit of it. It's a little bit of an indicator, but again, it's end of the year. Yes, they're trying to get a spot on the team, but some of these guys know they have a spot on their team. But there's a few guys that shined, and Ratti, look, I know everybody was up in the air with him. I had a long conversations with more than a few people about him. I still ranked him 19th, regardless of what I was told and what their concerns were and everything else. And the reason I did that was because he's a big skilled center who, when he gets in the offensive zone, he knows what to do with the puck. Now, I did admit that, yes, there were times where I felt like he could have some better shifts. But again, he's still a young player, and I think the projecting is the key here. And I do think the projecting is what's probably hurt him as far as where he got drafted and what teams were projecting. But again, the best projection of all is always playing against your peers. And since he did that well against his peers, he's making the Islanders look good. Now, the Jake Sanderson one's an interesting one because he could play in the NHL, right? He could. Should he, though? Like, he's with the Ottawa Senators. And at the end of the day, he could still go back to North Dakota and sign and play at the end of that season when their season's over. He could skate, no problem. He could puck handle and all that, no problem. He could be a little stronger. And so if it were me, I would want him to go back one more season in the NCAA. If we're both under the agreement that, hey, when your season's over, we'll sign you and you don't have to worry about that. Now, if he's pushing them because he's one of those guys that's going to give the hints like, hey, if you keep sending me back, maybe I'll just stay here, then you have to sign him. But if they have a choice, I think they should send him back one more year.
Yeah, I was doing some research for my Hockey Buzz blog today, Russ, and Matthew Nyes, who's the Leafs second-round pick, Nate Lehman, was very effusive in his praise of him, said he was one of the biggest surprises of camp, and he had 4 goals. Now, didn't the U.S. have a split squad? So, I mean,
they had a split squad, and then they joined it, I guess, for like the last game. And that was a pretty great lineup. I forget where Nyes was. He was maybe second or third line. Right. But, yeah, I just wrote about him for Elite Prospects when that drops. I did get another scout's input on him. He's a real good player. I saw him in the All-America Prospects game, and I think that's when his season started getting better. There was this point where I guess he had a bad first half, but he started looking good at that point, and he's been good ever since. So I think there's a lot to be happy about there.
And the leading scorer in the tournament was on Ratti's line, and that was Roni Hirvonen, the Leafs second-round pick from last year. And the leading defenseman in terms of scoring was Topi Niemelä, who was the best defenseman at the World Junior last year. So, for everybody talking about the Leafs not having prospects because they only had 3 draft picks, well, they had 12 in the previous draft. So that's where, where they're Esmir is asking, what do you think of Dawson Mercer from the Devils? Do you think he needs another year before getting the call?
Yeah, I like Mercer, but he's a guy that definitely has speed. He's got a great wrist shot, but he does like to sort of settle around the dirty areas at times. And I just think he needs to get a little stronger too. There's no reason to put him in this year. They've added to their offense. I would wait on him.
Kevin Anthony also asks, is Jakub Vrana going to fit in Detroit after asking for arbitration?
Oh, yeah. That's teams don't hold against you if you ask for arbitration, and I think they'll get a deal done. It's probably going to be a shorter deal in the $4.5 million range for him. He's coming off a $3+ million deal. Had a good season last year, and I think it's in his best interest as well as theirs to do a shorter deal because they're on a flat cap, and he's a pretty dynamic scorer. And on this team, in Washington, he had to share the spotlight, share the ice time. In Detroit, he is the big dog, and so he'll if he just waits it out, he could have a pretty major season, and then he could get a really big ticket. So I don't think anybody in Detroit's worried about getting him re-signed.
Right. And finally, we're now through a week of the Olympics in Tokyo. I still haven't watched much of it, but El Guapo is asking, what are the odds the NHL goes to the Olympics? Kev, the U.S. Olympic Committee, USA Hockey, named Mike Sullivan, the Pittsburgh coach, as the presumptive coach for Team USA for Beijing. Team Canada has not named a coach yet because they said they're not going to name one until they're for sure going to Beijing, which to me strikes me as they don't want to offend anybody who they wouldn't choose. So that's why they're making the choice.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. But yeah, I mean, it's looking good. The insurance issue, I guess, is getting cleared up. They found someone to insure them, and but you can see, kind of the issue if you're watching the Olympics now, where NBC has done a pretty good job of connecting the families back home with the athletes, but that's going to go on with the NHL players who, are going to have their, kids and, because most of not all, but a lot of the Olympians, NHL players will be a little bit older. So, they're going to have kids that will, know their dad is playing and stuff. And normally you come over with a pretty large contingent, your parents and everyone else, you won't be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty big issue for everyone. Although I hear that players said, yeah, we're going. So even though that's going to happen in China as well.
All right, guys, great show. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.